Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will begin by making a few observations about the judgment today and about the case generally in the broader context in which it occurred. This case from its inception was flawed because of its politicization. The first prosecutor of this court, Mr. Crane, I said hello to him in court. He's somewhere in the building. He went before the United States Congress, the Committee on International Relations, in February of 2006. That was before Charles Taylor was arrested, before the first witness was sworn and testified in this case. And Mr. Crane said that the evidence he had confirmed to him that 4 persons, Charles Taylor, Fode Sebana Sanko, Muammar Gaddafi, and the current president of Burkina Faso, His Excellency Blaise Compaoré, sat down and came up with a plan to destabilize West Africa. This was a sworn statement made to the US Congress. And Crane said he elected to proceed against Charles Taylor and not against the late Gaddafi and Blaise Compaoré because of evidentiary issues. This selectivity problem is reflected today as we speak in Syria as well. But for 2 powerful nations, 2 members of the Security Council, Russia and China, Bashar al-Assad would have been charged and indicted by the International Criminal Court. If you're friends with one of the Permanent 5, you're not likely to be charged or prosecuted because it takes a collective will and the galvanization of money, support to establish these courts and to bring someone to justice. And in the case of Syria, if Russia and China put their foot down, then it's not going to happen. But in the case of Charles Taylor, when he had exhausted all his friendships with any of the Permanent 5, it was fair game for him at that point. So he's a victim of selectivity of prosecution. What we now have as a consequence of this judgment in the landscape of international criminal law is an entirely chaotic jurisprudence. The law on aiding and abetting now has, if you will, different meanings in different courts in The Hague. And it is not just an academic exercise. It is not an exercise for us lawyers and academics to mull over. It has practical consequences, severe practical consequences. If, for example, you arm rebels today in Syria, and you know, as we've all read in the media, that the allegations that they commit war crimes or crimes against humanity, whether it's use of chemical weapons or other crimes. And if, for example, you provided them vehicles to go to a peace conference, and mind you, vehicles can be used for both a lawful purpose and unlawful purposes. And if they use those vehicles to commit crimes, and if those crimes, if those vehicles had a substantial effect on the commission of those crimes, under this jurisprudence by the special court, you could be held liable. And this is a very dangerous precedent to set. Another ramification, also a departure from established jurisprudence, is the court's pronouncement that aiding and abetting does not warrant a lesser sentence than other forms of liability. You cannot say that the person who is the trigger man, the person who uses the machete, the person who disperses the chemical weapons, that that person is in the same category as perhaps someone who provides finances. There is a qualitative difference between the 2 offenders. And in case after case after case, if you study and chronicle the sentences that have been imposed, you will find there is a distinct thread that runs through all of them, and that is that the aider and abetter, the accessory, not the principal perpetrator, receives a lesser sentence. This type of judgment cannot, in my view, be viewed as a victory for the victims, the people of Sierra Leone who suffered tremendously over a 10-year civil war and went through unimaginable consequences because of the violence they experienced. It cannot be viewed as a victory for the fight against impunity in Africa and elsewhere. if you pick and choose who gets to be tried, depending on political considerations. And it certainly, for me, is not a victory for the prosecution in this case. And so these are broader issues that, whether you like Mr. Taylor or not, they have to be confronted and they should be debated.